Hi, I'm Modou Yacine, and I'm from Senegal. I live in Chicago. I'm here in Lagos, Portugal, south of Portugal, at the LAC, which is a art center residency where they host African artists from the diaspora who share, common roots with the history and the legacy of colonialism here. I thank you to be here. One behind me is called Alkebulan, and it's the African map, as you can see, and it's a map I saw at the museum, at the Slavery Museum, and I believe it's one of the first because it's sort of kind of not finished and a little bit incomplete, and it has a lot of sort of also propaganda and all of that. So I liked to kind of like use archival material and history, in my work. So it was very perfect. And the title of the show is Alkebulan, which is the original name of Africa before, the colonialism and all of the migration and all of that. So yeah, and another piece is called The Hidden Man, and it's a red painting of a portrait, an abstract portrait of a black man that I found also at the museum here, and it was one of the few, if not the only painting of a black person in the museum. So and it was called The People of the Golden Coast, the series, it was like him and other people. So, and I found it very compelling, after all of this history, that went through Lagos, and all of the migration and slavery and all of that came to Lagos, that, in the 21st century, what we have there is one painting of a black man, So for me, it was just like so symbolic of how history has been erased and almost disappeared, So for me, it's my way of sort of keeping him alive, and giving him a new life that's going to be gone. Maybe somebody one day going to paint my painting, who knows. So I like that sort of poetic journey that comes with seeing the image in the museum. So, and another one is called Lagos, The Colors of Lagos. And, traveling through, the land, coming to Lagos and being here, I think the color I see the most are the green, the yellow, the orange, the earth, all of this tone of ochre and earth tone with the green, and a little bit of the blue gray of the sea and the sky. So that's what I try to combine here, in a very domestic sense, thinking about, the habitat, thinking about architecture, and thinking about the history of Portugal within Africa, and the first home that were built there for the workers. So, I got to find an image that I was able to use here to kind of express that sort of belonging, It's more about belonging in this painting, who belongs? How do I belong? What's the belonging, Like, do I belong because of the history Portugal has with Africa, Do I belong because it looks like Africa, it's close to the African coast? Do I belong because there is the Atlantic Ocean we share, So it's all about this sense of belonging, where I'm at, who I am, and, what's around me, So, and of course, the last one is Keep Digging, which is a blue painting of like, the metaphor is that it's a skeleton digging its own grave. So, and it was inspired by, seeing the skeleton, the image of a skeleton they discover here, at the Slavery Museum, which is part of the story where, we found here in Lagos 150 plus, bodies in a common grave, so, and which is said to be Africans, So just like that metaphor and that parody, it's almost theatrical that after 500 century, that one can come and dig and find those people, and then who who's digging, who's digging and how are we digging, and so going back to the idea of the skeleton itself, digging its own grave, so, and it's a blue and black painting, just like that sort of kind of like feel of an X-ray, like seeing through the earth, So that's why it's very dark and has this sort of light shining on the body that is white. One can say that the white is the skin, but also the white can be the bones, so. Yeah, no, for me, like what I would say is that it was a good encounter, a very good encounter I had with this place. And I always wanted to come to Portugal, and I had this chance, and I took it, and I'm very grateful for that because it has, given me space, at a moment in my life where I needed space, basically. And in a short time where I had to figure out what to do with that, so, and, because I've been thinking a lot about grief, and memories, and culture, which is my next leg in my work, is to talk about those things, So it was perfect here to come and have, feeling or seeing a whole city grieving, basically, because, what do you do when you find, bodies that are piled up in your backyard? Like it's going to give you a lot of grief, and I am grieving, and the story is grieving. So it was really good to be here at this time and sort of immerse myself in that and think about those things and come up with work that is sort of leaning on that, but also can take it to a more brighter place, a place of beauty, a place of happiness, and a place that is a bright future, So, and I think Lagos has given me that, and the painting, they speak for themselves, They are beautiful. So, I like the old man say, if the painting is good, then the place is good. So yes, thank you. Well, like I told him, it took Lagos for my brother that was born an hour flight away from me to meet me and me to meet him, So, I think one very particular thing that I really enjoyed here is the fact that I'm immersed in a Lusophone context, because, even though we all share within Europe and Europe within us, this history of slavery and colonialism, and war, I see us now as the same family, because it's a history we share and it's a pain we share, and we have to solve it together. We have to have a conversation about it. We have to be able to sort of like experience each other, know each other, beyond the language and beyond the, the borders, and beyond our own cultures, separately, And I think this was a great platform to kind of like get out of my Francophonie and get out of my Americanism, and come to a place that is to me almost familiar, but also neutral and unfamiliar, and creating this sort of little utopia here where artists can come and immerse and converge and make work is absolutely amazing, so. Yeah, I always wanted to make tiles for some reason, because in my work there is a lot of conversation about architecture, and architecture in a domestic sense. Yes, you can see the facade and the abstraction of the building, but like how do we live within our spaces? And in Senegal we have this very sort of new contemporary culture of tile making, and and a lot of that show up in my work, because also the colonial legacy of the black and white tile from Parisian architecture. So I always wanted to make tile, and and being in Lagos and realizing, wow, I'm in Portugal. It's the country of tile, you know, like everything, you know, like it's like a fiesta, you know, like a festival of tiles, you know, and and you know, like randomly like this, you know, I was having a conversation with one of your friends from outside of LAC, and she said to me, "Do you know that at LAC they have, you know, good shop, ceramic shop, you know, and one way lead to another way, and here I am collaborating with 2 artists from here, and discovering all of these techniques and way of making with clay, you know, that I always wanted to sort of kind of like confront myself with, but didn't have the skills. So, and this is giving me a way of also just bringing the domesticity in the painting onto the space and in a sculptural form or architectural form. And I always want, when I go to a residency, to work with the local and get the local flavor, get the local creativity, get the local technique, you know, have a conversation with the local, because, you know, we all think of ourselves as global artists, international artists, but, you know, you cannot have the global without the local, you know. The global is made of small locality, small locals, and that's where actually the craft, the culture, the concept, you know, the context live fully its life, you know. So that was a good collaboration. Yeah, I understand, you know, like I'm a migrant myself, you know. I went to America to have a better life, you know. I went to America to discover a new culture, you know. I went to America, you know, to learn, to be educated in a different way, you know, to speak English, you know, to meet the African-American heroes of mine, you know. When I was a kid, I loved James Brown, you know. When I discovered Basquiat, I was like, okay, I'm on the next plane to go to New York, you know, whenever that is, but I will do it, you know. So, you know, that say, you know, like for me, migration also is movements and immersion, you know, immersing yourself in other places, in other culture, and discovering new language of making, you know. And we can all agree that, you know, we cannot live without our past. The past is haunting us, you know, and we need these spaces to resolve this trauma and to resolve, or even recreate a new world, recreate a new diasporic voice, you know. So I think every African artist, deep inside, one way or another, you will find in their work a reflection of post-colonialism, a reflection of decolonial, because, you know, we got to deconstruct and reconstruct, you know, take it apart and put it back together. So, and we cannot do it without the other. We have to sit in the same room, have some kind of like, you know, dialogue, and recreate the world that we shared for the last 400 years or 500 years, you know. So, and yeah. What I say that I was not the periphery of the Western world. I'm not the periphery of the Western world. I'm the center of Africa. You know, meaning like, yes, you're right, you know, most of the culture from the West that invaded Africa and colonialized us, you know, had this objective of teaching us something, of making us learn something new, you know, and it makes sense that now it's their turn to unlearn, you know, and but also we need African to learn from ourselves, you know. We need to learn, you know, we need to deconstruct, you know, unlearn also, you know, these things that were taught to us that we found out maybe were not ideal for us. So, and recreate, you know, the new self, you know, like every day, you know, I wake up, I want to be a new self. I want to be myself, you know. I don't want to be the other. You know, like, you know, otherness for me is a way to divide, and, you know, I like the idea of converging more toward the same destination, like collaborating, having a dialogue, and unifying, having a union, So yes, yeah. In that sense, I'm happy also to see that Africa is having this new renaissance. That is not only just the African Renaissance, but also it's a renaissance of the global South. All of this culture that were peripherized, all of this culture that were like marginalized, have now, an authority and a power to become their own center and create their own space, and let the others come to us.